Gabe reached out to us in early November, and he said, hey, it was just like an email from his Gmail. I think he's like, hey, I'd like to speak. And then I look him up, and I'm like, oh, man, this is like, how did we find this guy? So Gabe has had a really exciting career. I think one to certainly imitate. Originally from LA, he went to Brown University, started his career in Deloitte Consulting, and went to Google, and is now a high-ranking executive in TikTok. Who has a TikTok here? Who doesn't know what TikTok is? Okay, everyone knows. All right, well, I've talked enough tonight. I'm going to get out of the way, but I'm going to introduce Mr. Gabe Nicolau.
Thank you all so much. I'm really excited to be here. Promise that, the slides will actually be longer than however many slides that Joe presented earlier. So, bore you to death. Just kidding. All right, so quick few things about me. I'm married to my wife, Laura, for about 9 years. We have a 9-year-old daughter. We adopted her 4 years ago when she was 5 from China. We actually go to St. Vincent Fair over in the Upper East Side. Our daughter goes over to St. Catherine's for the Sunday school, which is a fantastic catechesis of Good Shepherd. This is a picture of us over during Christmas, and right after Christmas, we went over to Flushing in Chinatown and grabbed some delicious roast duck. During the pandemic, we adopted 2 cats. So the gray one there is Nellie, and then we've got Ollie. They're from the same litter, brothers and sisters. I grew up in LA, and then after LA, I moved out east, started working out in Boston, and in Boston, I was there for almost 15 years. I just recently moved to New York during the pandemic, just 2 years ago, so I'm still trying to get my bearings within overall New York and try to understand what the place is like, so I'm just as new. If you don't, see me working or hang out with my family, I'm usually playing tennis, board games. I love pandemic, played that during the pandemic, kind of ironic. I'm trying to heal from my tennis elbow at the moment, but for any of you who are up for tennis, let me know. Happy to go play a few matches. And also, I continue to do a lot of work with the Archdiocese of Boston. So, in Boston, there's a big Catholic community there of young adults, and I also got involved in serving and doing a lot of ministry there, doing a lot of board work. So, with the Archdiocese of Boston, I'm involved with I'm on the board of their iCatholic Media. So that includes Catholic TV, the Pilot newspaper, as well as the Bulletin. And I've worked with their vocations office in revamping their entire vocations website so that they could, improve the overall user journey and funnel more additional people over to their website, and in the hopes of really capturing those individuals and leading them to hopefully discern. And I also on the board with, I don't know if you guys recognize the symbol, but it's called the Oblates of the Virgin Mary. I'm on their advisory board, help them with the overall digital transformation of their overall website and do everything from a digital standpoint. Now they have a ton of really great content that they bring forth nationally to evangelize and also bring awareness to their overall order. My overall career journey, I graduated from Brown, so I was in Rhode Island for 4 years. That was my first time going out to the East Coast for a long period of time. My first time experiencing snow, so it was kind of crazy. And then I joined Deloitte immediately right after. I was very fortunate to get a lot of my business fundamentals in strategy and operations and management, and just understanding how everything works. And from there, I had the very fortunate chance of going over to Google, over to the ad side of the business. So I joined Google. Basically, it's at the time what is called an analytical lead, and essentially I'm helping to consult a lot of Fortune 500 related companies in analyzing the various different search data that we get internally within Google, as well as the ads data, and basically coming up with an overall marketing strategy and plan for how they should be investing their dollars so that they could grow their business. I had that for a couple years and really grew my career at Google with a lot of various different global leadership programs. And then eventually took a role where it was a new team kicking off, where we're bringing a new product to market, and I was essentially the go-to-market leader for that part of the business. And then afterwards, around 2020, I got a call from a buddy who had left. He had gone to TikTok. At the time, it was just like a dancing app. I was like, hey, you should come. Like, it's really cool. Like, a lot of really interesting things happening here. And talked to a few folks in the company. They're starting up their ads business. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go for it and try it out. So I've been there for 3 years now. It's been one heck of a ride. Been able to see the company grow. Been able to build new products, bring them to market, and see them out in the market, and being able to help various different advertisers to basically see their business grow with us at TikTok. Cool. So before I jump into the overall talk, I want to introduce, or actually probably most of you know about the parable of the talents, right? Everyone here know about the parable? It's a quick summary or synopsis of it. It's essentially, Jesus tells this parable of this master that essentially gives 3 servants a couple of talents, right? The first servant, he gives 5 talents, and that servant was able to come back and say, like, hey, I was able to take that, do some, various different business tradings, and got you back 5 additional talents. The second servant, he was given 2 talents, and the same thing. He was able to kind of multiply that and be able to bring back an additional 2. Third servant, however, was scared and ended up burying that talent. And then when the master came back, he said, what have you done for me with that talent? He said, I was scared, you're a master that, sows where you don't reap, and so I buried it, here it is back. And the master was furious. Basically said to him, you could have at least put it in the bank and earned me some interest. And so, he basically took it away and gave it to the one who had more. And overall, I can assure you, moral of the story here is God is not a venture capitalist, right? The main thing, there are actually many interpretations of this overall parable, but one of the things I want you to all think about is, for the purposes of this talk especially, what if, those talents is really about God trying to teach us about what are the various different abilities and capabilities that we have yet to discover, right? What if, it's about, we have yet to find out what are the different gifts that he had given to us that we need to unearth. That we have yet to really discover and understand what our true potential is, and that we have yet to understand what it is that he has plans for us and how we can use these gifts for the greater kingdom of God. So keep that in mind as that new mindset and that overall framework, because ultimately thinking of it that way will help us to start to get outside of our own comfort bubble. So I want to talk about a little framework. Business people love frameworks, so I'm giving you a framework. So this is something that the overall talk is about struggle and adaptation and growth, and really with struggle, it also comes with fear, right? And at the end of the day, what this is like the process for how we could develop more overall resilience, right? And this is something that we all go through in terms of the overall process for how we grow and discover our overall talents and overall skills. And what's important to note is also at the very center of it is prayer and reflection. Without that prayer and reflection, it's going to be very hard for us to really identify and fine-tune and understand what is it that we can do and what our potential is. And so I want you all to really remember that as we're going through and go through the overall framework for how we can develop more of that resilience. So let's start first with struggle and fear, right? What is struggle and what is fear? And with struggle is important because that's what leads us to grow. And without that struggle, we do not grow at all, right? And that's what helps us to develop that full potential. even at a cellular level, right? Like, labs have shown that cells which are given a slightly unfavorable environment actually becomes better and stronger compared to cells that are in a petri dish environment that is with ideal conditions, right? It's part of like also evolution and the overall adaptation. For fear is about being uncomfortable, right? And the reason why we might have that fear is like it's a change of our habits. It's a change of how we constantly, continuously do things, and it's getting outside of our overall comfort zone. And sometimes it's about the fear of failure, the fear of what other people might think, and what the perception of it is when you do fail and take risks. And sometimes fear can trump faith if we let it. And that's a very important aspect, and which is why we also need to consider, like, how do we bring God into our lives to be able to overcome that area of fear. For myself, I think that's like probably the biggest challenge and root cause when it comes to being able to take any kind of action. It's always fear that stops me. So in terms of how to take action towards this struggle as well as this fear, when it comes to struggle, it's important to first identify what is that struggle, right? You got to recognize, and you can see that perhaps you have been experiencing through this struggle for a while, and that you're identifying that there are these patterns of these challenges and these issues that you've been facing. Or that you might be able to identify that struggle for something that you're about to embark on, and you know that that's kind of something that is going to be very challenging for you. But it first starts with the overall recognition and that identification. When it comes to fear, right, in order to overcome that fear, you got to change that mindset. You got to change it to that growth mindset and the power of yet, right? I don't know if any of you have heard of this concept of the growth mindset. There's a fantastic TED Talk that's available online that you should watch. Just search growth mindset. There's a famous psychologist from Stanford named Carol Dweck, and she basically describes her body of research related to growth mindset. And what it is, in its very basic, simple form, it's changing your overall language to let yourself know that you may not be good at it yet, but you are developing that skill over time. And through that process, you are improving and you're getting more of that confidence. So it's about that power of yet. And they've had some studies which show, they talked to a bunch of elementary school kids, and they taught them that, like, by learning this growth mindset, you can become smarter, because these neurons in your brain are actually, you're building new connections within neurons. You're becoming smarter, and you can actually be more successful. And when they looked at those kids and how they perform compared to a control group of kids where they did not tell this about this growth mindset, those kids that learned about the growth mindset, they outperformed. And we actually started doing this at home as well. My daughter, she actually has a lot of disabilities. Disabilities in terms of physical, fine motor, as well as even learning and overall processing. And so it's very frustrating for her. And at times, she would say, like, I'm not good at this. Like, I'll never be able to do this. And we tell her, no. Like, you're not good at it yet. And you are improving every single day, and you're eventually going to get there. And even just that alone, like, we're already starting to see a change in confidence, and hopefully that she'll be able to eventually turn that into more determination as well as more perseverance. So that's the action to tackle struggle as well as fear. Now, again, it's always important to bring forth, the prayer and reflection aspect. So how do you do that when it comes to struggle as well as fear? The main thing to think of is really, how do you surrender yourself? Surrender yourself to God. And with that also comes humility. Because you have to be able to surrender in order to bring forth that humility, right? How do you just bring your struggles and your fears to God and ask him, you take care of it? And you got to have the humility and be humble to be able to actually come to God to do that to begin with. And perhaps he may also introduce you and give you some ideas of who are the people that you can talk to and who you can reach out to be able to help you to overcome some of these challenges and these fears. There's a fantastic surrender novena that I utilize on the Hallow app. So, 9-day novena, and it's actually made from the spiritual director of Padre Pio, Don Delindo Rotolo, and it's amazing, it's fantastic. At times of when I struggle, I pray the surrender novena. Okay, so after that struggle and fear comes adaptation. Now, what does that mean? So that's when you start to get onto that process for improving, for embarking on that change. And that's when you're making that decision to actually learn that new skill. Or sometimes it might be that there's a situation that has changed that forces you to have to change, or that something is repeatedly happening over and over again that it's so painful that you have no choice but to change. And actually, I have a good example of that when I was early days at TikTok. So when I was starting out, there were only about 3 people on my team. I was able to get a lot of their updates and their overall reporting very easily. We had team meetings in a very intimate setting. But as my team grew, it grew all the way from 3 all the way to 30. And the overall cross-functional team also continued to grow. The overall reporting changed significantly. And I found myself in the midst of plenty of meetings, plenty of other work. I'm having to write and rewrite all of these various different updates and reports in order to ensure that the other cross-functional leaders are actually understanding what's happening in our organization. Finally, I was like, you know what? I've had enough. I need to take a step back and make that change. And so I worked on with my team to come up with various different changes. We changed the structure of our overall team meeting. I was able to hire in, various different managers. So managers had their own team meetings, and so I just met with the managers. And I was able to collect and get just the most substantial summaries and updates of what's most important so that I could bring that to the cross-functional teams for important decision-making, as well as understanding of where we are in the business. So sometimes, it's a situation might force you to have to change. So what are different actions that you can do in order to start that adaptation process? So in tech, we like to do testing. We go alpha testing, beta testing, and eventually you're general availability, right? And that concept of testing means that it doesn't have to be perfect, but you are improving along the way. So take small steps, small actions, and action leads to more action, because as you do it more often, you become more and more comfortable. And it's important as well when you're doing this testing, right? You let other people know. Let people know, hey, I'm learning this new skill. I'm trying this out. It'd be great if you could provide me some feedback, or ask for different opportunities. I want to continue to improve in this area. Help me to get there, right? I remember back at Google, I was at a pivotal point in my career where I've come to the realization that I want to get to that next level. I want to be able to be in a room with other executives and other clients and be able to do well in terms of presenting and having that presence. And so I worked with my manager at the time, who was very gracious in coaching me and providing me with the various different forums to be able to do that beta testing, right? I first, presented to her, and she gave me some feedback. And then I had opportunities to present to internal stakeholders and more senior internal stakeholders. And then eventually, got into the overall boardroom in like our what we call the partnerplex. And I had the opportunity to present just a small piece of the overall presentation. And eventually, as I got more and more comfortable, I presented a larger part, and I was able to eventually kind of take a large chunk of that overall presentation. So beta tests, test and learn. Little small steps will help along the way. When it comes to prayer and reflection on this area of adaptation, it's one thing that I've seen that's been very helpful, at least for me, is that daily examine. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the daily examine, but it's an Ignatian spirituality that you reflect upon your day to see how did I do, and where was God throughout my day, and how was he there with me, and where are the areas where I had maybe failed in personal relationships, in terms of what I was doing at work, how can I improve, right? Daily examine helps to do that. And along with that, what's important is also finding evidence. So as part of that everyday reflection, how do you go and just take and find 3 pieces of evidence of how you have made improvements in that area as you're doing your testing and your learning? And the more that you find those pieces of evidence, the more it's going to help you to realize that you are improving. You're in that path. Like you're not, you weren't good at it, but you weren't good yet. You were getting there, and you are getting there, right? So finding those evidence, just look for 3, right, daily, right? And see how you have made gains in that improvement, and that's going to help you to gain more of that confidence to eventually succeed. That next phase, then, is growth. Well, at this point, congratulations, you've leveled up, right? You've gained that new skill, and it's a skill set that's now within your overall skills repertoire. And it's something that you now feel comfortable in exercising that skill, and you can pull that out anytime. And it's something that you want to continue to keep practicing as well, because just because you've now learned this new skill, there is a spectrum for how good you are. You might be still a beginner at it, or all the way to becoming an overall expert, right? And so it's important to continue to keep practicing that so that you can continue to gain and improve. When it comes to action, so I just mentioned about continuing that practice of the skill, but you can also spread that love, right? Teach others, coach others. The more that you also teach and coach others, you become better at your craft. And for future leaders and for those who are leading a team or even just going forth and putting together an overall project plan for a team, you're not expected to have all the skill sets within your overall repertoire to be like the strongest, right? You don't necessarily have all the time in the world to develop every single skill. What's important to understand, where are the people who can help fill your various different gaps in your skill set, right? And then if you have the right people to complement you, you will have a much more successful, well-rounded team that can tackle any kind of project. And so, prayer and reflection. At this point in time, as you've developed this skill, it's important to praise God, be thankful. Thanksgiving, right? This is the parable of the 10 lepers. The 10 lepers where Jesus had healed all 10 of them, and they were all walking away, and then as they were walking, they realized that they've been healed of their leprosy. And they're all cheerful and excited, and then only one came back to thank Jesus. And Jesus asked, weren't there 10? What happened to the other 9? There were 10 who were healed, right? I have a very concrete example of this actually happened to myself. This was back in October of last year, around September to October. I had the opportunity to go to Sao Paulo, Brazil, where I was asked to give an overall presentation, and I was like, okay, great. And when I learned about it, it was actually supposed to be a really big presentation. And I was actually very excited about it because as a kid and growing up, I've looked at many different presenters, and I remember distinctly, oh wow, like Steve Jobs, like he can present a keynote. Like I want to be able to do that. I want to have the opportunity to do that one day. And so I've been working on that skill for a while, and joined a local Toastmasters. I mentioned before, having those opportunities to present internally to internal stakeholders at Google, as well as like to executives on the client side. And so, as I continue to develop that skill, I was like, wow, like this is my chance. This is my opportunity. And in Brazil, like it was this big event called Walk the Talk for TikTok, and there were about close to 1,000 people from brands and agencies that were attending the event, and I was basically presenting the vision of one of the products that I was building, and also announcing the launch of our product in Sao Paulo. And so I got up there and it was great, like delivered, awesome. I was super excited about it. But then right after that, I immediately went to the next thing. I had another presentation. I was like, all right, got to present, like it's in New York City. And then another thing where I have to present. I had to fly over to Singapore to present to a bunch of sales leaders on next year's vision of the overall products that I'm building. And I was just on the go every single time. I forgot. Like I was basically these guys over here, these lepers. Except it was probably worse because, throughout, like I didn't forget to pray. Like I was still praying, but then I was like asking for like, oh, please help me on this next president, help me on this next thing. It was a lot of supplication, and there wasn't a lot of thanksgiving, right? Can you imagine, like if these, one of these lepers, like after being healed, like, tripped and fell and, like skinned his knee and then went back to Jesus, oh, like, can you do me a favor? Can you just like heal me again? Like, that was me. That was not good. I come to that realization, and eventually I took the time to just sit down and had a prayer and just told God, like, I'm sorry. I'm very grateful for everything that you had done for me. And all I could do here is I could feel it, like he's like just embracing me and saying, that's okay, you did well. So don't forget praise and thanksgiving. All right, one last kind of case study of how, taking the example of everything that we had from struggle and fear to adaptation all the way to growth. So this is about kind of like midpoint in my career at Google, where I was I'd progressed to be pretty senior on my analytical lead role. And essentially, I was trying to hit a cap in terms of my overall growth. And I've come to realize that, like I'm unable to actually produce any kind of like new and interesting analyses because the tools that were available to me within the company, I was unable to go beyond that. And that, in order to get deeper into some of, more insightful analysis and insights, I had to actually be able to do database querying and learning like a new syntax and a new language. And that was really scary for me. I was terrible at coding. And I know that it was something that was very difficult. And being a little bit more senior in my role, it was also seemed like embarrassing that like I don't have such a skill set, and how am I going to continue to grow within this? And so I brought that to prayer a lot. It's like how do I do this? And And I came to realize, like, no, I need to be humble and just like, I gotta ask for help. And so I was asking God for help, and eventually, through prayer, I had that courage to also, ask my manager, like, hey, can you support me on this? This is something I do want to learn. It's hard for me, but I want to really learn this to be able to kind of take my insights to the next level. And so he supported me. He allowed me to, buy some resources in order to help learn the basics for SQL. And then I also had the opportunity to work with a colleague. I asked a colleague who was new to Google, but like has learned this stuff in a prior job. And I asked him, like, can you help me on this? Like, I don't really know how to do this, and I would love to learn. And I'll be forever gracious. This guy, his name is Alex Mers, and he sat down with me for a couple days and just walked through the details with me from like basics. And so I started to adapt. I started to test and learn, right? I started to do like very basic querying skills to start. And then eventually started to do stuff that was more advanced. Started to ask, like, okay, certain business problems that were real, and how can I take that business problem and start querying the databases and come up with an analysis and insight that helps answer that business problem. And then as I did that more and more, I became more comfortable and realized, like, hey, this is now a pretty good skill that I have, and I'm able to showcase much more insightful, much more interesting analysis that can help my clients and also help the overall business grow. And that was really exciting. And then when it came to that growth area, and like as a analytics leader, I also, came to realize, I'm getting good at this, but like I'm not necessarily the best. And my colleague who taught me all this, he was great at digging deep into those databases and coming out with these insights, but he wasn't very good at packaging all of these insights into solutions that was helpful and useful for the sales teams to scale. And so what I did was like, hey, let's partner together. Like, let's solve the big business problem together. And with the complementing of our skill sets, we were able to take a pretty big, meaty business problem that we found at the time, and we were able to build a solution that allowed us to optimize an advertiser's account and be able to maximize our ROI. And we were able to scale that solution globally, and it led to tens of millions of incremental dollars. And it was really cool, really exciting. And I remember like I took that time to really give thanks, because like I'd come a long way from being fearful, not knowing how to do any of this, to making a big impact. And that eventually helped land me on my next role that allowed me to become that go-to-market lead and that leader to bring products to market, and help gave me the foundations to actually build a business plan grounded on data, grounded on analyses, and help my team to really grow that part of the business in multiples. So before I close, resources for your growth journey. One of my favorite things is actually the Monk Manual. I know that many people probably utilize digital calendars on your phone and stuff. Like I do too, but I also like going analog. And the Monk Manual is amazing. 90-day planner. It basically has different areas that includes opportunity for you to reflect on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, as well as on a monthly basis. And you start to notice and see what are the various different habits that are happening within your life, and how can you make improvements in those different areas. Hollow app, I think probably many of you are maybe familiar with it, but if you're not, it's a great app. A lot of free prayers and resources. I have the paid version. Some of my favorites, the sleep examine. Like before I go to bed, I just turn it on. It's like, all right, let's reflect on the day, and then it just get conked out. And the Surrender Novena, of course, which I mentioned earlier. Growth mindset, definitely check out, the power of believing that you can improve. That's a great talk. It's like, I think 10, 15 minutes, amazing. And it's like a huge body of research, a lot of evidence on how the growth mindset can help. And then also the last piece, servant leadership training. this is actually something I've been working on with the religious order, the Oblates of the Virgin Mary, to help promote. They've developed this servant leadership training called Now I Begin. They originally had built this for religious leaders, and the idea is like, how do you become a servant leader, similar to how Jesus had served, like the ultimate servant leader, and they're creating a version for working professionals. It's an online-based course. It's going to be very exciting, but scan the QR code, and you could be on the overall wait list. I would be happy to send over more information about it once it launches. So to close out, I'm going to go back again to the parable of the talents, right? So remember that we are on a journey, right? And that God has amazing plans for all of us. And we're all in this very amazing, we have this amazing opportunity to discover what those talents are. And, back to also what Joe was saying earlier, how do you use those talents to help in glorifying God? And how do you use that in various different ministries where you can volunteer and really help the church? Whether it might be, you name it, helping with the homeless ministry, or volunteering, at your local parish. If you've got financial skills, helping them with their overall accounting. Or helping them with their websites, and if you're big in social media, how do you help them to gain a presence and be able to help with evangelizing or vocations? So think about that. Think about how you can use your gifts and talents to really help the church. And I'll close with this gospel verse, which was the verse in me and my wife's wedding. You're the light of the world. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Thank you. Happy to take any questions if folks have questions. Yeah. And I'll also go back to this in case folks are interested. Yep, question back there. Am I going to let my daughter use TikTok? So we actually do some TikToks together, just for fun. I don't necessarily have her really consuming TikTok, but we make fun videos together. And that's just something that is silly and fun for us to do. We haven't gone viral yet, right? So one of these days we'll see. Yes. Got it. So the question was, in my example where I started with a team of 3 and then started to really grow, how do you prepare yourself for that type of situation? I think it's tough because it's something that's happening organically, right? Each week you're suddenly adding another team member onto your overall team. And then cross-functionally, other people are also adding a ton of people. And we were hiring mainly throughout the entire pandemic. So all of our starting class was done virtually. It's kind of crazy. In terms of preparation, I go back to really that reflection and that overall prayer. Because only when you take a step back and really think about your day, think about your week, think about your month, is when you start to notice these patterns of recognition, right? Of what are the different areas of challenges that you're facing. And you can take that and go back to your team as well and ask them hey, we've been growing and, we've been doing things a certain way so far. Is it helping? Is it working? Or do we need to evolve? Do we need to change? And if, depending on the pace of growth for your team and the overall company, you might need to do this on a quarterly basis, or sometimes for us, it was like every 2 months on a bi-monthly basis. And so we had to constantly evaluate, like, is what we're doing, does it still make sense? Or do we need to do things differently as like new teams come up and we need to work with them in a different way? So always, and that's why I think, the Monk manual is so great in terms of being able to help you with identifying those areas of needs, as well as figuring out, where can you improve on certain ways of working, as well as your overall habits. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, great question. So the question was, my colleague whom I asked to help teach me SQL, like what was a way, what was it that I said, or like how did I ask that helped him to actually take that time and help me out. To be completely honest, there wasn't really a special way, if anything. Like number one, I prayed. I was like, I hope that this guy will be willing to help. But he was in general like a very friendly guy, I very much valued his friendship and his generosity in dedicating that amount of time to teach me. But really, I was very humble about it. Like he knew that I was a bit more senior than he was at the time, and that I have a lot of really great analyses that I already output. But I told him, I was just very humble about it, that hey, I'm noticing that you're doing some really amazing work, and you're finding some data sets that I don't have access to, that you're able to answer certain questions that I can only dream of answering. Would you be willing to help me and teach me and train me? There's a chance that he could have said no, and that would have been the end of it, or I would have been able. I would have to seek out someone else to pursue this. But luckily, he did not. And I think part of it is just being humble, and depending on a person, more likely than not, I'd say that people are willing to help. And if not, then there are other people that you can find. Yes.
What are your views on sort of your experiences more with Catholicism sort of in tech? I work in tech as well, and I think in various tech firms it kind of ranges from kind of agnosticism to outright anti-Catholic or anti-Catholic values type of thoughts in the workplace. So I was interested in what your thoughts are on it and the future you see with tech.
Yeah, definitely. So the question was what are my overall views on tech and Catholicism, and the overall spectrum of things. I'd say that it's I have many views and kind of opinions on this. I think within tech itself, sometimes you kind of see both ends of the overall spectrum. There are a lot of folks that may be a lot more agnostic or atheist, and that's fine. It's, again, wherever they are in their overall journey of faith, right? And then I've also seen other people who work in tech that are also quite devout. They may not express or say it, in the overall workplace. But sometimes, when you're having a conversation, like a lunch conversation, you throw in a little bit thing in there, oh yeah, this past weekend I went on a retreat. And they're like, oh, what? What is that? A retreat? I was like, okay. And then we'd start having some conversations. I remember at Google, I joined a group, there's an online group within Google that was Catholic Googlers. And we would do the rosary together every week on a Thursday. And we would, take turns, and we had a whole Google slide of all the mysteries and everything, and it was great. And so there are ways to kind of support each other. I think also in general, from the from the perspective of how our church is engaging and utilizing media and technology, I think there's a big gap, right? Our church is very much behind the times in that. And so that's, again, like one of my passion points is really like, how can I use what I know and, the skill sets I've developed to be able to help the church to be able to better evangelize, to be able to spread their message so that they could develop more vocations. And if you yourself have that, passion as well, like, come reach out to me. Like, I'd be happy to chat with you. Like, even the area of like data analytics, right? Like how many churches or religious orders like are really understanding the analytics behind their finances of like where do all their donors come from, and like and analyzing where are all of their costs, and like how could they do different things in order to better help support themselves. Like it's the church can't run all on its own, right? Like, I mean, they can, but I think they could benefit a lot from lay people like ourselves to be able to utilize those gifts, utilize those talents that we have yet to, gain, and hopefully be able to help the church and also in helping to glorify God. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Question. Yes. Great question. So when I talked about surrender, like how do you know that you've done your part and the rest is up to God? I think part of it is just really that reflection, right? I think one of the reasons why I like the novena is because like I know that, okay, that's like a period of time that I'm going to dedicate myself to really surrendering, like 9 days, right? And as you kind of go through the process, like, and you continue to reflect, you can start to see like what's happening, right? Like, is there some kind of like transformation or some kind of thing that's happening that's allowing me to start to take that next step? If fear is what's crippling me from taking action, am I starting to see and notice different things around me that is leading and guiding me towards being able to take that next step, to start beta testing, to start, taking those small risks so that I can start to move forward. And then from there, then that, okay, from that and starting to do that daily examine, that like, okay, yeah, God is with me and he's helping me throughout the way. So I think, that surrender and like in doing a novena, it's like, I think it's a good way, it's very structured to help you at least like dedicate your time to help pray and ask for that help. Question in the back.
Do you have any advice on discovering your talents, or if you have talents, how to choose?
So the question is advice on discovering your talents, or if you have multiple talents, how do you choose? That's a good question. I think like a lot of times it tends to be situational as well. Sometimes it might be, a lot of this I have is in the context of work and overall career. But it's also about the types of skills and talents that you gain in your overall personal life, right? I mentioned that we adopted, and it was like a very scary thing for me, like just instant father, and I realized I lacked a lot of skills in overall fatherhood, and suddenly having to care for a 5-year-old, and that's really scary. And also, a child who has been kind of removed from her home in an orphanage setting, so she's suffering from a lot of loss, and there are various different kind of behavioral issues and like attachment challenges. And so I realized that I was put in a situation where I needed to like pick up some new skills and to learn. So like again, like it can be situational in terms of realizing that, hey, you know what, there's something that I'm lacking, I'm missing, I need to like seek out that help. So I think it again, like being reflective and realizing that you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again, and using that as an opportunity to take that action. Okay, Great. Well, thank you all so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gabe. I don't think, do we know your TikTok handle?
Oh, yeah. It's, I forgot to add it. Gosh, it's,
We'll put it
yeah. We'll send a follow-up email. It's Choco Milk 5. That was, for those who were around back in the day, that was like my AOL instant messenger.
Mine was actually similar somehow. Thank you, Gabe. Perfect presentation. Really informative. Next speech, Mr. Carl Kilb will be at NYU on the 15th. I would try to register. We can't have over probably 60 or 70 people, so the link is live on YCP. We're going to head to Bill's Bar afterwards if you guys would like to keep congregating. We're going to stay for another probably half hour if you want to talk to Gabe up close and personal. But really appreciate it. Again, I will probably never give that YCP presentation again, so I really appreciate you guys listening. The main point of these events is just congregating, community, and just getting to connect with each other. So thanks again, and we'll start heading over there. So.